All right, guys, we're going to talk about graphing a little bit. And when you talk about graphing, slope is a big deal. So we're going to review slope just for a minute and make sure that you remember everything you need to know about slope. All right, rate of change is the same formula as slope. So rate of change is the ratio that shows how one variable changes with respect to another. On a linear graph, this is called slope. Okay, and slope is written as a ratio, okay, that's a fraction, of the vertical change, your rise, to the horizontal change, your run. So you have heard rise over run, between any 2 points on a line. This remains constant for any 2 points on the same line. All right, slope is written as a fraction in simplest form, and the variable we use is m for slope. All right, so a couple things you may want to write down is rise over run and the difference in y's over the difference in x's. That's your slope formula. All right, so let's look at the different types of slope. All right, if you look at a graph and it goes from left to right, we always look at a graph going from left to right, and going from left to right, if it's going uphill, this is considered a positive slope. So just remember, you read from left to right, and you're going to look at a graph from left to right, and that's how you determine whether your slope is positive or negative. All right, so positive slope goes uphill from left to right. That means a negative slope goes downhill from left to right. A zero means it's flat or it's a horizontal line, and an undefined slope is a vertical line or up and down. All right, talking about graphing. Graphing a linear equation using slope-intercept. We just talked about slope, so we know how to look at slope, but now you also have to know what your y-intercept is. All right, so you can see here your y-intercept is always going to be 0b. B is the letter that we use for our y-intercept. 0 is your x, and then whatever the y value is will be the b. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is use the slope of the line to create more points. So you're going to first graph your y-intercept and then use that point as a starting point to graph more points. So if we look at our equation, we have negative x plus 5. So our b is negative 1, and our slope is 5. So we have a slope and a y-intercept, and these are easy to graph. So we just start with our y-intercept, which is negative 1. So you go down 1, so it's 0, negative 1. And then we use our slope to graph the next point. Oh, sorry. I did those in reverse. Our slope, trying to do this too fast. So our slope is negative 1. Our y-intercept is 5. All right. Hope you guys caught that before I changed it, but don't want to tell you wrong. All right, so your y-intercept is your b. Y equals mx plus b. So our slope is the number in front of x. In this case, it's a negative, so that's assumed to be negative 1. And our b is 5. So now we're going to start and go from 0 up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we're going to use our slope of negative 1. So we want to make that a fraction. So you're going to go down 1 plus 1, down 1 plus 1, down 1 plus 1. And that's how you would graph that line. All right, the next one, let's do one more since I messed up the first one. Your slope is negative 3, and your y-intercept is negative 1. So this time I'm going to go down negative 1. And I'm going to do a slope of negative 3. Again, make that a fraction. It's a little easier. So I'm going to start at my y-intercept. That's my starting point. So I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3, over 1. Or you can go up 1, 2, 3, back 1. All right, and that creates your, well, let's see if I can draw a line here. I think it moved on me. But there you go. Right, the next example we're going to look at is how to graph an equation. This time it's in standard form. Again, standard form, ax plus by equals c. And our x and y are on the same side. That's how I know it's in standard form. So there's a couple different ways to graph this, and they're both pretty easy. So I'm going to show you how to graph these. First, by using the intercepts. I think you've seen this before, but just in case. So if we use our intercepts, we know that we're going to have 0, something, and something 0. All right, so when we plug in 0 for x, and I just put my finger over the x, I'm going to put the pencil over it here, put the 0 in for x, that becomes 0, and you have 3y equals negative 3. Divide both sides by 3, y equals negative 1. So that's 1 point on this graph. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put a 0 in for y. 3 times 0 is 0, so x equals negative 3. All right, so this is a quick, easy way to graph an equation in standard form. So I'm going to have 0, negative 1 is 1 point. And I'm going to have negative 3 on my x, 1, 2, 3, 0. And that is one way to graph this equation. Okay, so you can do that very quickly and easily. If you forget how to do that, you can also solve this for y, which means you're putting it in slope-intercept form. So I can subtract x from both sides. So I'm going to have 3y equals negative x minus 3. And then I'm going to divide everything by 3. So y equals, this would be a negative 1 over 3. And then negative 3 divided by 3 is negative 1. All right, so if we go up here and we try to graph this equation, I'm going to put this in red now. We're going to use our y-intercept at negative 1. And we're going to have a slope of negative 3. So if we come down 1 and go over 1, 2, 3. Let's see, down 1 over 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to go from here down 1 over 3. And you can see that it graphs the same exact line. So it's just two different ways to graph a line when it's in standard form. Okay, so you can graph it using your intercepts, or you can put it in slope-intercept form and graph. Whichever you feel is easier is what you should do. All right, a couple special graphs, vertical and horizontal lines. So if we're graphing a vertical or a horizontal line, here's a couple things to remember. When you have a vertical line, it's written in the form x equals a, where a represents the line's x-intercept. So you see here it goes 1, 2, 3. The x-intercept is positive 3. So the equation of this graph would be x equals 3. Okay, there's no y in this equation here. And a horizontal line doesn't have an x. Okay, so a horizontal line is written in the form of y equals a, where a represents the y-intercept. So you can see here you drop down to negative 1. So this one is just a line, y equals negative 1. So in this equation there's no x and there's no m. So that's just how you write a horizontal and a vertical line. All right, so to talk about graphing, sometimes you have to write an equation before you can graph anything. So if you're given 2 points and you need to write an equation or graph that equation, first thing you have to do is find the slope. given 2 points, you can graph those 2 points on x and y axis, and that would be an easy way to graph those 2 points and create a line. But you also can write an equation using the slope formula and then turning that into the point slope formula. So if we use the slope formula, we know that we have x and y 0.1 and x and y 0.2. So the first thing I'm going to do is find the slope by doing the difference of y's over the difference of x's. So negative 1 minus 7 over 1 minus negative 3, which is plus 3. All right, so I'm going to have negative 1 and negative 7 is negative 8 over 4. Negative 8 divided by 4 is negative 2. All right, so that gives us a slope, and we already have a point. So let's use the first point and the slope to write in point slope form. So I'm going to have y minus my y, which is 7, equals slope, which is negative 2, times x minus negative 3. That makes that a plus 3. So I'm going to rewrite this in slope-intercept form to graph. So I'm going to have y minus 7 equals, distribute the negative 2. Negative 2 times x is negative 2x. Negative 2 times positive 3 is negative 6. Add 7 to both sides. Y equals negative 2x plus 1. Now if you go back and you want to graph this again, you can graph this using your 2 points. You could go negative or left 3 up 7, and you could go plus 1 down 1 and graph those points. Or you can also graph using your slope and y-intercept now that you have written it in slope-intercept form. So if I graph, my y-intercept is at 1. This is a sketch. So I'm just sketching a graph real quick. All right, so negative 2. So I'd go from my y-intercept down to plus 1, because you always look at that as a fraction. Okay, and that would be how you graph it using the equation. Okay, so given 2 points, you could graph the 2 points. You can find the slope. You can then write it in point slope form, and you can change it to slope intercept form and graph it that way as well. All right, so all things graphing. This is lots of different ways to graph. This should be review, but you are going to be graphing in the next assignment, so I just kind of wanted to touch base and go over some stuff to make sure you knew all the different ways that you could write equations and graph. All right, guys, just to summarize what we've looked at, so your slope is found by doing rise over run. Sometimes you'll see the little triangle thing. That just means change in y over change in x. That's just a math symbol. Or you'll see y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Those all are formulas for slope. Those all just mean change in y's over change in x's, or difference in y's over difference in x's. All right, so we've looked at slope-intercept form, point slope form, standard form. You don't have to worry about intercept form right now. It's kind of like just another version of your intercepts. But vertical form and a horizontal line. So a vertical line, x equals a. Horizontal line, we looked at y equals a. They're using b here, but it's the y-intercept, so they're using b from the slope-intercept form in this equation. All right, so these are equations to know. Again, you don't have to worry about this one. All right, so just be aware when you have different equations. Standard form, you've got a, b, and c are just integers. They're just numbers. X and y are your variables. Slope-intercept, you've got your m, which is your slope. Your b is your y-intercept. With point slope form, you've got m is still your slope and your point x and y. And remember, a linear equation